Hello, I'm Kevin Church, and this month for June 2020, we have Carroll Brown as our MUFIC Songwriter of the Month. Hey, Carroll, what's going on, buddy?
How are you, buddy? Good to see you.
It's great to see you as always.
My treat.
So, tell our listeners or our viewers, where did your performance and music influences come from? Like, where did it all begin?
Well, I was a kid growing up in church, and my mom played the piano, and she still does, but she played the piano, and we all sang, and so as children, we sang together in church. And the first time I sang myself was when I was probably not much more older than a toddler, but in church. So it was all church when I started.
That's really cool. So you were just exposed to music at an early age through your whole life, in church and abroad. What got you into songwriting as far as your first influences and things like that? Who inspired you?
Yeah. Well, I didn't think about songwriting, but I did learn later that my mom was very influenced by songwriters. The gospel, all gospel, of course. But once I was old enough to start playing guitar and playing in church, and then listening to bluegrass music out of Charlotte, North Carolina, Arthur Smith, and listening to Flatt and Scruggs on television.
Wow, yeah, absolutely.
Once you started seeing that, then you started thinking beyond gospel, or I did. And then once I was old enough in high school and going into college, then the singer-songwriter type person was there. By that time, I started writing songs, and I don't even know why. But it was James Taylor and Jim Croce, Cat Stevens, Harry Chapin, that era when I really started focusing on playing other people's original songs and writing some of my own. Not ever thinking that my own songs would go anywhere, but I had the dream of performing, and by that time I was playing a few gigs, So
that's really cool. So, James Taylor and Harry Chapin and Jim Croce are some heavy hitters. I mean, I enjoy their music, I really do. So they inspired you as well. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So tell me about your songwriting process. Do you come up with lyrics first, a melody first? How do you go about it when you write?
Well, it's not the same way every time, but I typically write when I'm sitting still. And that's the thing that keeps us from writing these days, I think, is when we're running hither and yon and when we're scrolling on the social media instead of letting our mind have its time to play. And often I'm riding in my car on a long drive going somewhere. I travel back and forth up and down the coast, and I'm in my car and I get an idea. Usually it's either a song hook or a song idea or a line. And if I always think of what's my first line? I think the first line is a very important part of the song, like the first line in a book.
Right.
It kind of captures you, and it doesn't actually capture my attention to write the song until I think of how the song will be couched and what the first line is going to be. So I write the first line in my head, I get it, and I say, hey, that's cool. Then I get a second line, and if I get a third line, then I go find then I reach for a pen or something, And I usually just jot down some ideas while I'm writing. Occasionally I talk into my phone, record them if I get a melody at the same time. But most of the time it's lyric and ideas, and the melody follows closely.
That's really cool. So with technology, like we're talking about with the phone, you can just pull it out and say a phrase or something and come back to it later.
Right.
It's really convenient. I find it convenient.
But I've been doing that forever, though, because before the phones, we had a little handheld cassette.
Yes.
And that one week I was telling you earlier about when I wrote so many songs at one time at the band room in St. Petersburg, St. Pete Beach. Mm-hmm. I had gone to the beach that day, but I didn't bring a swimsuit, this, that, so I just went back to the room. And I said, well, what am I going to do today? And I remembered my little recorder. I brought it in and sat down and commenced to write some songs. Went through the old ideas on the old little mini cassette. recorder. You know?
See, that's great. That's smart.
It was pre-smartphone.
Oh, yeah. No distractions either. You just hit play.
Right.
Just don't hit record. Be careful.
Right.
Don't want to lose it. So, all right. So we understand that the first line is the most important to create or base your song on. That's what you think, and that's your craft. That's you. I have to agree with you on that because I feel like if you can't grab them out of the gate, I find that when I'm testing songs on people playing,
Yeah.
you'll play like one line, you'll play one verse, and
Yeah.
they're halfway with you, and then you hit the second verse, and the second verse grabs them. That's when you know you got to move the second verse up to the first verse.
Right.
Like, I need to change that because we're not grabbing them out of the gate.
But I've had a first line, oftentimes, that stayed with me for years before I ever finished the song. I wrote one time called Lonely River, and I had written a line driving across the Mississippi River and said, on the western coast of Georgia, there's a river there that flows. It's the western coast of Georgia, you know? Well, there is a western coast of Georgia on the Tallahatchie River or whatever that is. I don't know what the name of that river is, but I later wrote, western coast of Georgia, there's a river there that flows like a herd of turtles moving to an unseen undertow. You know, and then I said, okay, I got to write this one now. And then I had to sit down and write it. I wrote that song that week, sitting in that band room at St. Pete Beach. The western coast of Georgia had been in my head for 10 years, 10 years. But I never sat down to finish it.
Right.
But the thing about that gig at St. Pete Beach is it was a 5-nighter, so you had 4 full days to sit in one place, undistracted. That's the ticket.
That's great. We'll be right back.
After this commercial interruption. Well, the night lights shine bright in the city. They can lead a man a long, long way from home. Leave a wife and a newborn child on the gambler's prayer that I'll make the big time in the city. Well, the sun shines in the morning and the rain falls most every afternoon. I see the dreamers come and go like the winter winds that blow down the busy streets of the city. And when the day is done, I'll make my way down to that empty little second-story room. I'll be wishing I was right back there in my front porch rocking chair and not here alone in the city. When the sun goes down on the city and the bright lights outshine the moon, I'll curse the lonely day and this dream that makes me stay in this cold city so far away from home. And when the day is done, I'll make my way down to that empty little second-story room. I'll be wishing I was right back there in my front porch rocking chair. That's where I belong, and I swear I'll be there soon. I wish I was right back there in my front porch rocking chair, and not here alone in the city. Really what I'm saying is I was sitting in one place for 4 days, and that's when you had the time and opportunity to create. And when we're running around and around doing this and doing that, it inhibits the creative, and we know that, and yet we still spend our time on a smartphone and scroll through the Facebook instead of sitting down to ourselves.
Agreed. Yeah. So, which leads me to this part. So, we've talked about the importance of the first line of the song, the process of how you craft your songs sometimes, or a lot of the time anyway. And then we get to knowing you as someone who performs Irish and Celtic music, right? So, in Scottish songs and stuff like that. What led you to that?
Well, I've always been a guy who was interested in the song. I wanted the song to be the star of the show and not the singer or performer. And I've always been sort of tuned in on how good the song is and what the story is in the song or whatever that is, more so than the performance of the song. And to me, a lot of the music had become more generic, and that kind of ebbs and flows over the years. When you're an old guy like me, I've seen this come and go over and over, where it all became the same, then it all changed, it all became the same, and you know.
Right.
Anyway, but when I moved to Charleston in 1981, it wasn't long after that I met some great friends, who some of them worked at the Navy Yard, and some of them were from out of town. But I was playing full time at the Mills House Hotel, the Best Friend bar there. And we had a little niche of friends that came in. Before you know it, we all liked some of the same folk music, and we started getting together at someone's home and just sitting around and swapping songs. And I came across a whole body of music from Ireland that still had great clarity, great angst, still had a story to tell, and in some cases maybe an axe to grind.
Right.
There was still a reason for this song, and I learned a whole body of new songs just because I thought they were so good. Songs like The Fields of Athenry.
Absolutely,
Songs like Dublin in the Rare Old Times, and a song called There Were Roses. And anyway, it was great songs, and I started learning them, and that ended up putting me kind of in line when there came an opening at Tommy Condon's pub, when the young lady was leaving there, Kathy Bradley was leaving. And I got a chance to step in and do some of those gigs, and then became the house act. Before Steve Carroll came to town, I was a house act for a year or two at Tommy Condon's. And because I was playing the Irish pub, I went out and learned 25 more Irish songs. Some of the stuff that you need to play, you know. Turalura Lura and The Wild Rover and No Nay Never, and you know, those songs that you need to play. And so that put me on the path to the Irish pub circuit. And when I was leaving Charleston and I was leaving the Mills House, I literally had to commit to that whole series of pubs all over the South, which was Georgia and Florida and South and North Carolina and Tennessee, playing that circuit of pubs. And then just more and more involved in the Irish music itself. Before you know it, in '97, I went to Ireland with Harry O'Donoghue, and I've been going almost every year since then, taking my own tours over there now. So it just became more and more a part of what I do. And I'm Scots-Irish in my ancestry, partially. I'm also half German on my mother's side. But it was the Irish thing and the Scottish thing that drew me in, and especially once I was in Ireland, I felt a connection that was palpable. I mean, it was tangible to me.
That's so awesome, man. So as someone who performs at Tommy's now, myself, thanks to you bringing me in, you've introduced me to these Irish songs too, and working that pub and having to learn Irish music from requests and things like that, when people come in and they ask for certain songs, maybe I've never heard them. I'm always moved by them because they're so good. Hundreds of years old and just still pertinent. It's pretty darn awesome. And then also with that kind of inspiration helps me become a better writer too.
Oh yeah.
And a better performer.
Well, it's those songs that have stood the test of time. We're talking about songwriting here at this interview. Those songs that have stood the test of time, not only in the wonderful songs that are 80 years old or 100 years old out of Ireland and Scotland, but it's the same with the standards here in this country, you know, from the first half of the 1900s. Those great classic songs, you know, songwriters, you know, Johnny Mercer and those people that wrote the great songs, there's still something to look back on as a format to say, how would I craft a song that'll have life, that'll have legs, that'll have longevity?
Exactly.
Know? You're not writing something necessarily. Those that weren't that good have fallen away.
Right.
We remember the mighty ones because they had staying power.
I agree with that. Yeah. Great answer.
Yeah.
So you also ran a recording studio one time, correct?
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us about that?
Well, when I was in Nashville, my college degree was in media arts and journalism, and I studied things like what is a microphone, you know, and so I made good grades. But then I ran we had a custom label and a publishing company in Nashville, and with partners that lived in Nashville. And I was running the demo studio for the publishing company. When songs would come in, once they were chosen and made the cut, then we recorded them in the publishing company demo studio. I ran the studio there. And then when I moved to Charleston later, I was looking around for a place to record. And I found one place, and they actually tried to sell me the place because they knew, they were going out of business, and I was from out of town. They saw me coming. Anyway, but I started my own studio here because I wanted a place to record. And then before you know it, I started recording other people. And we ended up recording a lot of different acts. The first full album I produced was Robert Hutto, The Shadows disc.
Okay.
It was a cassette then, pre-disc. But, and then before you know it, we did all kinds of we've done 100 full albums, you know, here in this market on local and regional acts, and thousands of demos and other projects, recorded projects. It was a full-time, full-fledged recording studio. I started it in the early 80s, 83, I would say, and I sold it in 97 to Jay Miley, and it is today Charleston Recording on James Island. And still going. And that's where I record today. I've done 18 albums over the years. I'm still doing albums, and I have another one this year. I'm tracking a new one beginning next week.
Oh, wonderful.
And that's all original songs. I still got a bunch of songs that never seen the light of day. But I still track with Jay at Charleston Recording. He co-produces because he and I work well together. But I want to track with a live band. I don't want to just sit and do my this and add that. So we track with guitar, my guitar, vocal, piano, bass, and drums, and then add overdubs. That's our process.
That's great. So next week you're going to start on this project?
Theoretically.
Theoretically?
I've started doing the demos at home. I've got 14 songs that I'm going to record.
So it's a full-blown project.
It's a full project, yeah. There's no need to do a part of a project. I don't do EPs, you know.
I got you.
If you're going to spend the money on duplicating it, doing real hard copies, you may as well do a project, you know.
Right.
But I've got a lot of songs that have never seen the light of day that I want to get out, and I'm still writing. You know, I still write a lot,
Well, you're in the
especially
car.
during a pandemic.
Yeah, I hear that. There's where you're being still. However, if put the phone down for a little bit.
That's right.
Okay, so you're still finding new songs in your heart and mind. That's obvious. That was the next question I had for you. And a few years back, you did the Songwriters group. Like you were the first in Charleston to bring that to us.
Well, we opened a venue on the Isle of Palms in late 2003, early 2004. Ocean Song Cafe was on the Isle of Palms, right near the traffic light there. And but I wanted it to be a real venue, a music venue, no TVs, and let music be the focus of it. I didn't want to run a restaurant or a bar. I wanted to run a music room. Now you have to have a restaurant and a bar to go with it. So we did, and we hired staff and management and this and that. But we did dedicated music. We had a country night and we had a songwriter night and other things like that, and brought in regional acts and then national acts to flesh out the local and regional stuff. But it was a music venue dedicated, and there just happened not to be a songwriters night as such, I think, in Charleston at the time. I designed the venue after the Bluebird in Nashville. In fact, I was going to call it the Seabird.
Nice.
Instead of the Bluebird, the Seabird. But I already had the Ocean Song label, and so I named it Ocean Song instead. We already had a logo. I didn't have to do another logo. So we did the logo, and I still have the T-shirt. But we wanted to do a songwriter night, and so we had to find someone to host it and do all of that, and we had a couple of different hosts before I started doing it myself again. But that's when I met a lot of the songwriters that are still kind of a songwriting core in Charleston today. You know, Big Frank Waddell and Dave Moulton and David Owens and Chris Tidestrom.
Oh yeah,
and others. We're all in that same first group. Ricky Myatt. All in that same first group right there together, you know.
So great. I mean, and a lot of those names have been on our show already, and we plan on bringing as many as we can here.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Carroll. So what song are we going to do today?
I couldn't decide what song to do, of course, you know, but I think I'm going to do a song called This City. When I graduated college, the first thing I did within a month was go to New York and start chasing hard the dream that I'd already been chasing hard. But I finished my degree. Took me 7 years to get a 4-year degree. Worked my way through school, playing gigs. But went straight to New York. And I was actually in New York waiting, having been turned down, waiting to go back home the next day in a hotel room when I wrote a song called The City. And it's a difference between your comfort zone on the home farm and the city. I started to name the song New York City, but it could have been Nashville, it could have been LA, it could have been Miami. You know?
Right.
So it's the city as opposed to being home on the front porch, you know.
Gotcha. So we have Carroll, excuse me, I had to clear my throat. We have Karen Egan playing with us.
My first time to do music with Karen, I'm a big fan. We've been buddies a long time. Herself and the beautiful noise that they make, you know.
Oh, man, she's great. Yeah. Well, let's get to it, man. Carroll Brown, everybody.